Hello forum, this is PPPoE, the poster of how to make your, how to take advantage of your connection speed and NIC. Let's first start off with info. As you can see, I'm running Windows 7 64-bit, which in case if you're running a different operating system, many or some of these settings will not appear. Let's start off with the connection speed. To find your connection speed, you want to take your average download speed and times it by 8, which will give you, well, here, calculator. I'm going to take my average download speed, which is 1.5, times it by 8, and that is my kilobits per second, or megabits per second. And if you wanted to go from megabits per second to megabytes, divide by 8. Simple math. And as you can see, 1200 kilobits per second. Then you want to take your, well, not take, but select your networking card. As you can see, these two are there as well. Those are the built-in NICs that are on your motherboard that many users might use, or probably use. So you can select one of those, or whichever one you are using, which if it is being used, you'll see there's no IP address. So you want to look for the one with the IP address. Once you have found that, set your MTU, which you can either find here, or if you know off the top of your head, just pop it in there. Next, the best setting for this is disabled, CTCP, and for this option, you have to actually select what you need. Well, what your system can handle. If you have a dedicated network card like what's up here, like a Bigfoot network card or a Killer Xeno Pro, then set this to enabled. But if you're running something like these, then set that to disabled, because those can't really run its own TCP commands. So set that to disabled if you are running any of those, but enabled if you're running a dedicated. Now, receive side scaling should be set to enabled if you are running a multi-core system or a system that supports hyper-threading. If you're running just a single core system with no hyper-threading, then set that to disabled. DCA should be set if you are running a dual core system or higher, or set to enabled. If you're running a single core system with hyper-threading included, set this to disabled, because those systems normally don't support DCA. So next is NetDMA, which can be enabled on most systems nowadays. So I just set it to enabled. If anything, if it's not supported by your system, you won't notice any impact, and if it does support it, probably still won't notice anything. So just enable it for the heck of it. Time to live should be set to 64. You can set it lower, but 64 is pretty good for most connections. I don't want to get into details about this because that's a long talk, so I'm just going to move on to ECN now. ECN capability should be disabled due to its instability with many games and other applications. This should be set to disabled unless you want all this to get set back to default, which I'm sure you don't. This is like TCP chimney offload. So if you are not running a dedicated NIC, this should be disabled. If you are running dedicated, enabled. And this should be set to, or ticked, like it is right now, if you want websites to take advantage of a higher Windows scaling size, or window size, I mean. This should be disabled because it adds a 12-byte packet header, which you can use those extra 12 bytes to send something else. So just untick that. Next, we can, these are described in the forum, so I'm just going to skip those. These should be set to 4, 5, 6, and 7. This I have disabled, but if you're a security nut, then enable it. I have it disabled just to free up some CPU processing. This should be set to 3 for most users, but if you have no packet loss, then set this to 1. I mean absolutely no packet loss to any country after doing like mini speed tests or any ping tests. I have no packet loss, so I set it to 1 just in case there is that one packet loss while I'm in game. This should be set, well, For most users, if you don't do a whole lot of torrenting or don't have a lot of RAM, set this to disabled. Well, if you don't have a lot of RAM, just set this to disabled. But if you have like 4 gigs or 8 gigs like I do, set this to enabled just to have it. And if you don't do a lot of torrenting and just do web browsing and play games, leave this as default. If you do a lot of downloading and play games, balanced. If you do torrenting and like home network file sharing, set this to optimized. This should be set to 0 at all times. You don't want applications being or having any reserves. So while you're playing games, normally you'll have all internet consuming programs turned off. So just leave this at 0. This should be left at default. It says the best or recommended is 1 or NA, but I say 2 because that is supported by most applications and is best for all of them. But if you are a World of Warcraft nut, then you can set this to 1, which will give you the best ping possible to the server you're playing in. This should be set to 1 to allow all TCP packets to be sent and received and loaded as quickly as possible. Pretty much no buffer. This should be just left alone as long as you have this enabled. Set this to 65535 and set this to 30, or you can set it to 1. That way your ports can be reclaimed instantly, or 30, so they get reclaimed every 30 seconds. Or if you close out your game, they'll get or all those ports will get reclaimed after 30 seconds. And that's the conclusion. Sorry I kind of went fast, I just don't want this video being too big. Anyways, enjoy.